when the largest financial system in the world endorses the idea of reserve of any asset type, that asset type gains an entirely new level of legitimacy, because it basically says that we as a government believe that this asset type has longevity and that this asset type has value. For much of history, while everything was on a form of the gold standard or a form of an asset-backed currency standard, this was mainly commodities like gold and silver and a few others. Over the last, let's say, 50, 60 years, there's been this interesting but possibly ultimately unsuccessful experiment of fiat money, where it is off of any gold backing or asset-backed model. And so there's a possibility that reserves for currencies, reserves for an economy, may not be just backed by commodities, right? So if we start moving towards a world where the backing of a currency, the backing of an economy is partly based on its reserves or largely based on its reserves, then it actually makes sense that you would have different asset types in those reserves. Because what that does is it creates diversification, right? So in my mind, the value of the crypto reserve is that, on the one hand, it legitimizes the cryptocurrency industry and the blockchain industry to an entirely new level, especially when someone like the US government does that, especially after the US government has been very negative on the whole industry, so it's a complete 180-degree shift. But the second thing that it does is it actually begins an interesting trend in terms of diversification of a country's reserves in general. That's actually kind of unique in the history of how governments and countries back their currency, back their economy. And I think the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the United States is possibly another similar direction like that. So while it really benefits our industry, it's also part of like a larger, more interesting trend of how do you diversify the reserves of a country. And I think the logical, simple answer to that is probably the same way you diversify any portfolio, which is that you get assets that are correlated with different things, right? So you get one set of assets that's correlated with one set of events, another set of assets correlated with another set of events. And so you have a kind of insurance or a hedge or a protection against that set of events happening and that set of events happening. That is really, I think, how maybe the model of reserves of countries might evolve at the central bank level. I know for sure that central banks have been buying, in some cases, historic amounts of gold. So it's clear to me, in a certain sense, that the fiat-based monetary system, the let it be done version of the monetary system, which is what fiat means, let it be done, let there be, is an interesting experiment that may or may not be working, right? And if you go back in the direction of an asset-backed currency or a one-to-one linked currency with real assets of some kind, then we're in a very different financial system now than we were in 50, 60 years ago, where you can actually acquire assets and manage assets other than gold very easily and efficiently, and extremely easily and efficiently in the Web3 blockchain context. So, I mean, it's very possible that you can see a world where a currency or an economy is asset-backed by things other than gold, so greater amounts of gold, but also other asset types. And that is what creates a certain backstop or a certain surety for the currency or the economy. If something like that happens, if the fiat money experiment isn't exactly what we thought it was, and the purchase of assets becomes the basis for currencies or economies to be considered reliable, then the assets that are used in that strategy of diversification will become immensely more valuable than they are today.